Afternoon, everyone. And I think to add to what Mpo said, I'll be the last one talking, and hopefully I won't bore you. It's been a long week for you. So I'll be talking about one of the control tools for African homesickness. We heard from the previous speakers that the control rely on surveillance, movement control, but also on vaccination. So although vaccination is extremely important, it's not the only element into the success that we're seeing, we're moving toward. So I'll talk a little bit about the organization where the vaccine is produced, because Ondersteput happened to be the place where the African horse sickness virus was first described. So we have a long history of more than 100 years working with this virus. And then I'll talk about the control that is currently ongoing with the vaccine that we produce, and then the plan with the new inactivated vaccine. So Ondersteput is a complex some of you are familiar with. That's where we have our veterinary faculty, we have our OBP and our research organization, which you can see there. And then we're one of the 3 institutes in the complex where we produce more than 50 vaccines. And African horse sickness obviously is one of those that we do produce. So we have a lot of experience and history in terms of African horse sickness. There's always been a feeling among the horse owner community that we've been going in circle for more than 100 years. In fact, if you look at this extract from a paper that was, or a communication that was made by a horse owner in 1900, he was already complaining about the fact that African horse sickness was a big problem and they were losing horses, and they were at the time of the British colony asking Cambridge to assist. And more recently, every time there's an outbreak, you get the same kind of complaint from a horse owner. It feels like we haven't been making progress, but there's been a huge amount of progress over the time. In fact, if you look at the 1915 paper from Arno Taylor, he described quite a number of characteristics of the virus that we still know today. So the knowledge on the virus has been around for more than 100 years, and that has helped really in controlling the disease over this period. And in the 60s, we were able to grow the virus in cells. So there's a wealth of knowledge around the virus. It's always interesting to see African horse sickness today and described as an African problem. If you look at the history of the disease, it has occurred in more areas than just in Africa. At the moment, we have it essentially in Africa, but I think it's always important to remember that it has occurred outside Africa. So it's always a potential risk beyond our continent. I won't go in detail about the virus, but it's important just to see some of the proteins that are helping us to better understand the virus and develop new tools in terms of vaccines, but also diagnostic tools. I won't get into the science. Why has been always having the feeling, people have been always having the feeling that the vaccine doesn't work? There's a number of elements to it. I won't go into that, but for us as vaccine producer and manufacturer, it's always of interest. We know that even though we have a very strict system in the country in terms of control of the disease, there are still a lot of people who either don't vaccinate, or those that don't believe in vaccine. You know, there's a worldwide trend of people being against vaccination. And all those elements have been contributing to the disease being maintained. The weakness in surveillance, not necessarily in South Africa, but in other parts of the continent, for example, have made the disease to still be endemic, and even in our neighboring area. I won't get into the control, but like I said, the 3 elements of the control we're contributing in the vaccination, and the other parts are dealt with, as we heard earlier, by our colleague. So I'll skip those. Another thing that makes the control of African horse sickness in South Africa always difficult is the fact that basically every year you get all the 9 serotypes of the virus circulating. It's not like the situation you had in Europe, in Spain, where there was one serotype that caused an outbreak and it was possible to eradicate. In Southern Africa and probably in most part of the continent, every year you get all the 9 serotypes circulating, which makes it quite complex. And the vaccine that we have protects against all the 9 serotypes. We don't have all the 9 serotypes in the vaccines, but there are only 7 of them. Because of the fact that there is cross-protection, it allows us to get a better protection against the disease. And it's also important to note that this live attenuated vaccine that has been around since '94, up to now is the best solution that we have. There's been a lot of attempts to develop new vaccines which have not always given the same level of efficacy. But we know that we have challenges on safety, obviously. So looking into those challenges of the vaccine, currently there are 3 manufacturers on the continent. We're probably the biggest in South Africa producing the vaccine. There's always been concerns around safety of the vaccine, and that's one of the reasons it was felt that there is a need to develop a new vaccine that will be safer than what we have, addressing issues of, for example, the ability to differentiate between infected animal and vaccinated, because that usually could create a problem in terms of exports of animal. So with that whole thinking going, there's been a process with the International Confederation of, as it was explained earlier, to look into what are the existing technology around, what technology could be considered as the next step for the development of the alternative vaccine. So we went through that process with a number of experts. Some of them are sitting in this room, to try to identify what could be the best characteristics of the ideal vaccine to consider for further development. And we came up with a report which some of you have seen also. Clearly, we defined what we call a target product profile. What is the profile of the vaccine that will address the main concerns, like the need for differentiating infected from vaccinated, improved safety, but also efficacy. And it was felt that this is just a model to show you the kind of document that one can come up with. So we came with the concept of an inactivated vaccine because it has a lot of advantage as listed there. And it will give us also the opportunity to differentiate between infected and vaccinated animal while also improving safety. And such vaccine can be used actually even in free countries, because you're not dealing with a live virus, you're dealing with a dead virus. So we have made a number, we've started this activity for more than a year, almost a year now. We're looking into developing the vaccine itself, but also establishing a facility where we can do experimental work, clinical work on horses. It has to be vector protected because, as you know, African horse sickness is transmitted by vectors. And we're looking also into the diagnostic tests, which will allow us to differentiate between infected and vaccinated. And there's a lot of interaction that is taking place both in South Africa but internationally as well. So just to show that the work has been ongoing, it's not just theories. We're making progress. We're hoping that by end of 2021, we may have already some of the results. And I think it was mentioned earlier that we got very good support from the Hong Kong Jockey Club that has contributed to this work that we're doing. So we're extremely grateful to the Hong Kong Jockey Club, and we hope that we'll get more support from other parts. Because one has to realize that African horse sickness is not a big market for a vaccine manufacturer. You're talking of maybe less than $3 million market, and most of the multinationals are not interested in such markets. So for investing into developing such a vaccine requires really some priming in terms of funding. And we also making progress with the vector protected. It may sound as a simple exercise for people who are not aware, but it's a highly regulated kind of structure that we have to put in place. And we heard about the DEF approval, which is quite tough to get. And we're hoping that we'll get that approval for this facility so that we can progress with the work. And then I did mention the differentiation between vaccinated and infected. There again, we're making good progress to come up with tests, both serological but also molecular tests that will make it possible to differentiate vaccinated animals from those that are infected. So that will make it easier as well to conduct export. But like it was mentioned, this whole effort is not only OBP being involved. There's been a process throughout involving a number of organizations in South Africa to try to work toward a better solution in terms of African horse sickness vaccines. So we have a local working group that has been ongoing, which involve academics, government, and private sector, where we've come up with a number of guidelines that will guide us in the future to select beyond this candidate vaccine that we have, but any other candidate that one could consider. So that's where we are with the alternative vaccine. We're still using currently the live attenuated vaccine, which has helped us over more than 100 years to control the disease. And we hope that with the new development, we'll come up with an even better vaccine in the near future. So thank you for